Pretty quiet, huh? When they go to sleep, pretty quiet. Those crickets. We're going to have to do tons better. Got lots of talent to be doing a lot of good things. And we tend to not want to do much of anything. Or tend to believe that we can do nothing. And I guess we can choose to do that. And let it all come on the next guy, I guess. And that somehow hasn't worked out for me to be able to be okay with. And I really don't know why. I see lots of people that will just wait and wait and wait. And I'm realizing the more I get into doing all this, the more I realize the more of us that wait, the more the nonsense and nastiness keeps coming on us. And if anybody can't see the reality game show this world has now become, the stupidity, the cockistocracy that rises to the top, it rules everybody because they all just take it. I don't know really much more to say about some of this stuff, and I wonder what the real reason that I do anything. And then I get an email, or I make a chat, and we get to making subject matter specific things. We get to move pretty fast, pretty quickly along. A lot of questions start to drop, the uncertainties start to drop. More certainty, more focus comes into bear. That focus that starts to put you on the right path to really becoming much more capable. And most of the time, you won't see any of that until you do. As myself, you have to go through this lesson somehow about what we're up against, and these are people that, big cheesy smile right in your face, don't care that they'll stab you. They're going to stab you in the back. I don't understand that whole world, but there it is. It is our world, and so we can walk around having a bunch of knives in our back, I guess, or watch our future, our progeny, our offspring, grow into having their knives in their back because the whole thing is they don't want to kill anybody. They just want to use you as a beast of burden. They're these people that have figured you out better than you've understood yourself. And somehow that doesn't set well with me, notwithstanding I really don't have a whole lot. There ain't going to be anybody looking over my grave for a family. It's just not going to happen. There's this lots in my life I knew coming along, though I didn't know that this wasn't going to be. And I didn't know why. It wasn't how I planned it out. But so partly I don't know why I care. But I do care. And I care about people who are earnestly not wanting to be run down. And to me, the biggest problem for me is watching these men who've been in prison for decades getting out because there was just no justice rendered. And the excuse is we did the best we could. We should have never been okay with that because that attitude devolves down. And it ends up being all kinds of problems that we see that everyone then puts their head in the behind a woodshed bag, a bucket of sand. We all carry them around with us, I suppose. Today I'm going to start someplace else, but we're going to end up going down coming honest this whole time. It speaks to the silent weapons or quiet wars thing. I think I'm not sure if I'm going to title it this, but the program's going to be more about the welcome to the largest limited hangout in the history of mankind. This is just an analogy of how we walk ourselves into a problem and we don't care to not do that. It's all around us now. In some regard, I'm not saying don't engage it. I'm saying you just have to know that battlefield and there's ways to go through it. And I guess that's the other light in my life is that you can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, if I can put it in these terms on this day, and you will go through it. But you're going to have to stay in the narrow path to do that. And you're not going to be able to use your prejudices and listening to me to do that. In fact, talking to a few people, chatting or emails, it starts to become a little bit more apparent. I always have to make a comment. Whoever else I've watched out there, and I've watched lots of people do their thing, they don't come at it the way I do at all. There's a subtlety about the way you really have to start to do it than what I've ever heard anybody ever talk about. And really, you can't really appreciate that, I don't think, until you start to do it and you start to work out how the subtlety works. In fact, one of the chats last night, I said, I don't look at this as a defensive move. It's an offense. We're under attack. Whatever you call it, whatever it is you're doing, you're under attack. And so, there's a way to approach that. You can be a defensive or you can become offensive. And there's all the things out there to tell us how to do that. If we were just to start looking at the right thing, not listen to everyone, listen to what your direction is and what you've chosen to make right. That'll start to line it up. But welcome to the largest limited hangout in the history of mankind, the interwebs. They call it a web for a reason, I'm sure. And this is going to be your April Fool's Day reminder that the crickets are considered by those running the Cockerstocracy to be quite fine. They love crickets. These are for all the April Fools that are out there. We get told once a year that we are the fools. And the reason why we're fools is because we are the crickets. And they just love that. Silent Weapons of Quiet Wars tells us you're going to plug in, they're going to take advantage, and you're not going to care. And I keep telling you that's what you're going to do, and for the most part, that's what you do. This will be BTW RLM 260 on all of y'all that are on past cast, broadcast, recast, anycast, Mindscast, whatever. Now on that point, I go Minds.com. I may be seeing a limited time on Minds.com. I'm now feeling like a second-class citizen over there, though I'm not gonna throw that out. I'm waiting for them. Jack, one of the guys who started Minds.com, says that they're going to work out a problem. Apparently, I'm a unique case, folks. And in a way, that was okay, but I don't think I'm a unique case. Folks, you got to now, with the token system, you have to now cough up a phone number. Now, they say they're not using that but to create a hash number, but, folks, we're going to find out that all this stuff is, once you put it in the digital realm, it's forever. So, to me, that's registration, and that's just a counter to my whole sense. And so right now I'm a second-class citizen where I can't participate in their rewards to continue to promote the broadcast. I have the points I have, and I guess this is a warning to all y'all Minds. I don't know if you can even send me anything as a bonus as you have, and thank you for all that you've done. I'm not quite sure what Minds is doing. When they went to the blockchain, folks, I'm telling you, this is not a decentralized condition. This is a centralizing cause. And until they work out a way to create a hashtag, because they do have a problem, and I'm not going to deny they have a problem with apparently make people overdo things. They make lots of accounts, and they try to participate in the rewards section so they can get lots of these things that are now tokenized. And so that means money, apparently, at the other end. Well, I've never been interested in that. But that's now me. I don't have a phone, so I have to... I'm now a unique case. And then I found out within days, I'm not a unique case. Lots of people don't have a phone, or they don't want to be registered. And so, not to belabor this, the point is that this internet, this limited hangout, PSYOP, called the internet, it really gets you to subtly bring you into wanting to participate with all this stuff. And so I'm not sure where all this goes for me. I've never tied into it. It interests me to no end. I think there's a way to get stuff done. There's a thought in me that if I could focus on it, I might be able to come up with some of the things that need to be done to actually keep this thing decentralized and private. And I've said, I think once you can figure out a way to do that, you can predict an answer to the future and position that anybody might come, any authority might come. You're going to be positioned well, and you're going to have a system that will work. Until someone understands what that is, this is just a big honeypot. And I don't understand why you don't have more talent coming to look at it. I know there's talent behind the scenes doing stuff, but I really don't understand. I don't know that they have the insight that I have to see this. No, one of the insights, and I still have to be really in depth. Again, the analysis really has to be looked at. Is what is the battlefield you're up against? You have to admit into that. You can't deny it. And then it is, how do we work and operate in that battlefield? And I said, one of the things you might be able to do is you take your productive capacity, that's yours and yours alone, and you then try to monetize that and make it private. Another thought, and I don't know how this would be done, it's just a thought, because you're going to find out that all this blockchaining is not secret at all. Absolutely not. We've heard this over and over, but it's absolutely not privatized. Is that you're probably going to have to make blockchains that are private, running on private places, that everyone understands where to go, and sandboxed, if I can use the term. In other words, it's like a long hallway with a bunch of doors. And if you don't have the right code to get into the agreement on the blockchain, you don't have a right to see what's in there. And I haven't thought about this in depth, but we're in a very serious time when I see, I guess the seriousness is not for me, because I'm not participating. I'm being actually cut out. And to me, it makes me smile a bit, but I'm sad about that. Because all the rest of you thinking you're going into this, it's the alternative. It's not. It's just a behavioral control tool. And this is the big deal. So I sound kind of negative, I guess, on this technology, but I'm really not. I don't think we have the appreciation of what these people that are in control of it actually do. And what it's all for. And all that's written down. You don't have to go far to figure out what it is. And that's how you start to learn how to avoid things. As I was explaining, the subtlety of what I do, I don't go in and defend myself. I set up a record that shows the offender is actually the criminal offender, and then I move a collateral to that. And it's a whole different type of thing. I don't know, like I said, it's the Aikido thing. You use the offenders, mass and force and energy against them eventually, but you have to engage it a bit in order to make that happen. And so we're given lots of information that's not correct. We buy into it. We want to make it easy. Listen, I'm a big procrastinator. Maybe a lot less than I used to be, but I like to wait. I like to enjoy life, but it just doesn't seem that we're going to be able to do that here. And so what does that mean? We're being run by wherever you look, there's a caucus dog. There's some authority out there that says that they have more authority than you, and they have the power, actual power, to have that happen. I don't understand how that works, but it does. And so until we address that, a lot of these things that we see in the world, these occupations, I just call them occupations. They're not the type of occupation you might think about, like you're going to work for yourself. No, these are the international invasions that happen right under your nose that are legal because you continue to let them. Why? Because you're crickets. Remember, it's April Fool's Day. That's your notice that you're a cricket. Unless you're not. No excuse will alleviate that obligation. Just a pretty funny thing in my mind. We all think we can excuse it away, look away. And really, you actually can't. And part of me is really disappointed that with all this fantastic technology, all the material science coming out, all the science that really exists, all the stuff we're finding out that we didn't know that's different and how it makes it even better, we're not coming together as a people to take advantage of that and live by that example. We're allowing these people that run the caucusocracy to take us down because we're crickets. All of you guys that know how to do the blockchain and this and that and whatever and do the programming, something I can do a bit, but I wasn't the master. I told you, I can't be that guy. I knew that guy when I saw him. It wasn't me. That aren't applying these things to figure out how to work through this system that we're in to actually make it privatized. I'm astonished, actually. There's a lot of tools available to us. I see the glimpses here and there. We're just not taking it in our hands. We allow the system to beat us down. We allow it to take up our time without coming up with concise, fast responses to it. And that's the other thing. I don't get into this. As ever said, well, we're going to do our legal processes in the courts. No, I go in, make the record that shows they're criminal, and then I move on collateral to that. It takes hardly no time at all. I don't engage that thing. And I don't want to dissuade you from listening to people who may tell you that, because that may be the only formula you have. This is not a joke, what they come in and destroy your lives over with all this system. They just come in your life, like that stakeholder, and then you're dealt with. And that's the hardest one to deal with. As we were talking again last night in a chat, the traffic issues like we talk about, they're the toughest because there's unless you're smart and intelligent, I guess, and you have worked it out before it happened, you're going to be met with some force and effect that you haven't had a record for, and it's a little bit more difficult to make that record after the fact. Not impossible, and I've talked about how you do it, to turn the table, but if you don't understand it or don't quite understand what I'm talking about, you're not going to have that in your disposal. That's not going to be the word in your mouth. It's not going to be the pen in your hand to your paper. That's not going to be exposing that there's someone that's a criminal that pretends that's using a costume to do so, and that's a crime. You're not going to have any of that to happen. And so getting onto the costumes and crimes and the mischaracterizations, let's move on to the tabs. I want to get onto something pretty quickly today about this, just showing you left and right. You have to know what you're doing. But on this day, a pretty interesting story came out a couple of days ago. I think this all anticipates lots of things. Wall Street Journal issues an embarrassing correction for claiming Moses struck Iraq for water, not Iraq. Pretty interesting little twist. This is not an April Fool's story, but we could play that. The Wall Street Journal issued what may be the best correction ever for a story which quoted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as saying Moses brought water from Iraq instead of from Iraq. The WSJ was trolled mercilessly on Twitter for the gaffe, whatever your linguistics is, that had injected an unexpected geopolitical twist into the centuries-old biblical tale in which Moses struck a rock to extract water for the Israelites that were wandering the desert after the exodus from Egypt. So you know I don't look at these stories for the face value. I look for what you're being told. And I'm looking for the story that's telling you the truth by telling you a lie. And they wrap all this, they tell you it's a geopolitical twist. Well, that was all probably the plan. But did you understand something? Right in the story, first paragraph, it says the quoted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's an Israeli. Yet Moses struck the rock to provide water to the Israelites. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is missing a couple letters. Because as an Israeli, he is not necessarily an Israelite. And I want everybody to consider this very deeply and listen to what I've said before about how we would go through and parse this through, even if we reduce the thing, and we should, I think, now that I've been looking at it, down to the right of possession of the land or the right of the inhabitants of the land. Give me your title. And who are you people? They weren't in the Bible called Israelis. And this has been the subtle twist that we all put on ourselves. Not the nice, oh, yeah, we got water from Iraq. No. This is a geopolitical statement. And this brings up trying to bring you the authority of what Benjamin Netanyahu is talking about, when in fact, he may or may not be worthy of what he's saying. And it's not an Israeli that has a right to say. Those are the occupiers. And for all that I'm insulting, it doesn't matter anymore, because that is the adulteration. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's an adulteration. On this day, there are people that have a land that was given to them. We do the research, and with all the books that are authoritative for it, we found out there's a people that lived in a land, and they were first recognized in that land right below Jerusalem. They could be called Jews, as the Strong's Concordance readjusts it. But that's not what the name was. They weren't Israelis for sure. And the tribes of people that they come from were Israelites. They were the sons and daughters from Israel, a man. He was an Israeli. So, I don't want to get too more deep. I think the point should be made by now. This is what they do to us. They get us to agree that the occupier over there has a standing to be on a land to hurt other people, and it's not true. We make a little twist of a joke. Oh, it's not from Iraq, it's from Iraq. In fact, that's about all that you would have gotten out of that, because the Israeli doesn't necessarily have the tie to being an Israelite. Because an Israeli appears to be an imposition by Britain on a land for a movement called Zionism. And I'm not even going to I'm not judging it one way or the other at that point. I'm saying we have a serious problem and people are dying over this adulteration. So you continue to be the April Fool on this, but they're telling us the truth of certain things if we'll look right forward to it. You make the mistake to call the people the Israelis that are supposed to be the Israelites that have the right to the land, and you've just been duped. What that proves out, I'm not even saying, because that would require people to look in on what they believe is theirs to do. And so on this day, we see an adulteration that we should have stopped. The crickets in us, those that are not stopping it, are allowing this to perpetrate. And people are dying around this lie. And I want to see the lie. I want it stopped. I don't care how this settles out in the truth. I just want it stopped myself. Whatever my words say, and however offense or agreement you may have, is really irrelevant to the point that we have a serious lie in the world that continues to go, that needs to be stopped. And as long as we don't arrest that crime, the crime continues, and now we're accessories. That's on us. It folds out this Israeli condition. This occupation folds out to affect more than that land. This is the other problem, which was very interesting news to come down this week on this, coming into this day. For those of you that believe in all of it, I'm just talking in the neutrality. There's some people that believe we got this higher cause, calling, spirituality, all this other, and I don't see one place hardly that it's even being effectuated. We'll give lip service to it all. something came up this last week that was kind of interesting, and I'm not sure where this is going to go either. But United States invasion of a foreign land underneath the fraud of the war on terror that it creates maybe coming to an end, except that we're just going to hand the baton to someone else. Trump freezes funds for the YPG PKK-held areas in Syria. This was the balkanization of the Syria plan. This is a big story. I don't know where it's going to go, but Trump is saying they're going to withhold $200 million in funds from the recovery area that the Kurds have. And this is also working with Turkey, so be careful. On this is not necessarily an answer either. This is a bunch of geopolitical stuff going on here. But Trump is saying he may very well pull back the funds that the United States is doing, and America, he says, is going to be out of Syria. Now, in the same week, France steps up and says they're going to take over the Manjib area and all this other stuff in Syria. But pulling out the army, the military of United States military out of Syria can't be but good, given that that whole thing is based on an entirely different, other plan to cause these Israeli interests to expand throughout the Middle East. And it's not been shown to be legitimate. It's actually, by international recognition, acknowledgement, been known to be an occupation, not actually viable, lawful there. And I wish people understood more the terminology that's being used in the context. Now, see, this is a lot. Everyone wants to know these definitions. You don't do it right. You don't understand, because those words just have no meaning, really, until you find the context for them. And then if someone's used them in a private sense, and you have to look in there's a private public, if you will. Not public-private. It's a private public. In other words, there can be open, private, closed agreements that are international in approach. Those people that wrote that agreement are the determiners of their terms. The author of the documents are the determiner of the terms, not you. So how that works in the United States, like for the Constitution, the judiciary has been given the power, though this is incorrect too, to interpret that Constitution. Now, that's incorrect too. I don't want to get all you technical accuracy mongers out there to jump on me about that. But I'm trying to get a conversation through. That the judiciary is supposed to look at some of this, and that's how that worked, because it's been said that the framers of that Constitution, the authors of the Constitution, made that so. Nobody else has a say on what that is. The determination of what that was given over to what's called a judiciary. Good, bad, or indifferent. And that's how this works. The Constitution, though it affects a territory, was private. And so the author of that have private terminology to that. And this is where I say, you got to know, if you're going to deal with that entity, you better deal in the terms as it deals with them, not as you fabricate in your mind that you think they are. And I hear I just see lots of this going on. It really kind of drives me nuts. And I own it drives me nuts because people are getting hurt under this delusion they've created for themselves, when the answer is really right in front of our face. So Trump did this, going to freeze the funds. I don't know. Freezing the fund doesn't mean that they can't be rethawed. Don't really know the underlying effort. Don't know how this guy's going to go work on all this stuff to really pull the United States out of the mess it made. And Trump says we're going to hand it over to others. Well, then France pops up. Well, I just want those people to get back to some kind of normalcy, and we can start looking at this whole thing again if it's our business. I'm not so sure it is. But so while Trump is going to stop the enforcement of the shooting over in the Syria area, in the Balkanized areas, he also has advanced the rule for the DOJ regarding and precipitated by this thing in Florida that I told you was a movement. I told you this was an end run about some things, and people aren't paying attention to the right stuff. That you could face 10 years in prison if you don't surrender your bump stock in 90 days. So while he's not going to pay for shooting and killing people in Syria, he's going to steal these bump stocks, these accoutrements on an arm, which you have a right to keep and bear. Now, I don't know that a bump stock is all that. I just don't think it's all that. I guess it could help. If you know your arm and your leg, but your arm in particular here, if you know your arm, you don't necessarily need this little aid. So in some regard, it's kind of irrelevant. But see, to me, this is more of the encroachment where it says in the prohibition against government interference, it shall not infringe the right to keep and bear, which includes the right to acquire, and the right to be prepared as you choose. This is not as the government chooses. Now, what did the government do? The government said, use their judiciary, said, well, no, it only meant what we say you can have. Completely ridiculous, and I heard crickets on that for years. I mean, it's not us, this is time before us, long times before us. But that's still the truth coming in here. You could face 10 years now because they're adjusting, they're infringing upon the arm you would choose to fight the government that would oppress you. And you're not. And so they're going to come and take this little thing away. Now again, I don't think they're neither here nor there. Oh, they're cool, they're kind of neat. Ingenious little device, but there's other ways to do exactly what this thing does if you know your arm. And practice. But so they're coming after you, folks, and you're sitting there as crickets, not doing anything. And this is really kind of as simple as I've been telling you about those of you that smoke cannabis, and you know the lie about that, and getting it turned around, like kratom, clean water, fluoride. We heard, I can tell you that by bringing the notice to us on how it works, how to make it work, and how to get it better. And I hear crickets from everybody I speak to, and I'm encouraged a bit. A lot more of you are calling, contacting me, and we're moving through your thing you want to make right. That thrills me to no end. I do thank you for stepping in and doing that for yourself, and then I appreciate that you ask me what I might think about it to kind of, as I tell you, put you on your own trailhead, since I get you on your path a little quicker than you might do it listening to many other places on the internet. That web of sticky stuff that can really mess you around. But facing 10 years for a bump stock accoutrement is not good. So how do you stop this? This is an executive branch imposition, and guess what? There's a process they have to go through. I keep telling you about how this all works. This is just not what they can just bring out. They have to go through this process. However the reason is, I've talked about it, but I'm not here to talk about that today. So Trump brings this out. The DOJ is going to impose a rule about this. And guess what has to happen? It has to go to the Federal Register. Well, guess what has to happen with that? Keep up with me. You know, those of you that have the answer, call it up, put in your chats, whatever. Be active, interactive with this thing. They have to make what? They have to make a comment period. I said one of the aspects of how you address this thing is to be engaged with the process that's been provided in due process that they use to interfere and infringe upon you legally. And then you all complain about legal, but you never stepped in like they did at No Dapple. They didn't do it right. They got beat down, and I'm the one who got the mud slung at me. I got the arrows slung at me, trying to tell everybody, no, there's a certain way to go about that. That's your due process. Why don't you follow it? You do have an argument. Put it forward. No, you don't do that. You all get upset at me for explaining that you have a certain way to do it. It's not the way you thought. Or you don't do it because you're not interested. Well, if you allow other people to come and infringe rights that are to everyone, whether you agree with it or not, it's to everybody, you're just accessorizing the theft of your rights that are supposed to be prohibited to government on this issue. They're going after bump stocks. They're going after the rest of it. Again, now they got, if it looks like something, that's a value. It's aesthetic value without value. It's an aesthetic observation without value. And they're using something without value to take a valuable thing, which is your ability, without question, to finally organize up when it finally got so bad and use arms in order to protect yourself against the very government oppressor that's coming to take your guns. Just like we were told by these people who authored the document. Now, so what do they got to do? They have to go through a process because they're making a rule about this. And so I'm going to be disappointing myself again. I talked about the kratom, I talked about the cannabis, I talked about the fluoride, I talked about all these things that you can do. Simple little letters, don't cost you hardly but 50 cents to send out and some time to write it, and research the subject matter and send a letter. No one's going to come to your house and throw you in jail over it, at least not yet. You have all this, it's no jeopardy, and will you raise a pen to paper, a typewriter, a key to a screen? What? Do you do any of that to engage this rule-making process that the Trump is going to try and shove down your throat, the theft of your bump stocks? And then are you going to then research the subject matter in order to provide a very formidable response about how they don't have the right to do that, as I've outlined prior. You don't have to use your own thoughts to start yourself. I've talked about where you start this conversation. Is it a silver bullet? No. Is it an answer? No. I don't know what an answer is when you're dealing with a caucusocracy, but at least you make the record. Now what are you doing? Oh, I'm not making a comment. Oh, good. It's not going to help. Not going to work. Why? Well, because you didn't make the right comment, or you didn't plan into the future to realize once you made your comment, you now have standing to go sue them. In an injunction, what I've been talking to you. It's not an on and on carried out process. If you do it right, there is no question. I told you it lasts only the time the rules say that an injunction lasts. That should be less than 2 weeks. Where do I find that? In the Rules of Civil Procedure for Injunctions. I don't make any of this stuff up, folks. This is all straight for us to be sitting there to do. Is it a little bit difficult? Yeah, because most of us are lazy. We haven't worked that muscle of being vigilant against encroachment. That as you start getting more involved and stop your yapping and you're talking about all you think you know and all the definitions you think you can use and all the things you think you know about the way it's supposed to be and all the historic things that are supposed to be irrelevant because we were supposed to run from England and not engage it because it was no good. When you start to settle down what's reality here and now and stop looking for all the excuses, all the exits to not be responsible, I think you're going to find this process to be pretty rewarding, and it doesn't really take up a lot of time once you get your desk organized, if I can say it that way. Now, I've got a link for you to the federalregister.gov for those of you that are interested in your gun rights. I would hope that you would approach it right from the absolute prohibition against government of the Second Amendment. Not what you think about it, not what the issue is and what the courts have said, but really that they have no right to make an issue of this. And say it in a short amount of words, so you don't have to go too far and make such a big deal about it. You don't have to go to historic presentation. You just have to show that how they don't have the jurisdiction to adjust it based on your right to choose. And in other words, the Second Amendment doesn't say that it's going to be determined by the government what you decide to use to fight their oppression. It's like the mining law. I'm going to put all this stuff, this is all grants and things. It's all the same type of law. Whether you all want to agree to understand it or not, I don't know. But mining law was a simple law for the roads. The construction of the highway is hereby granted. 1866 Act of Section 8. Construction of the highways is hereby granted. That was it. There was no mode, like you hear, you can only drive this thing or that thing on the road. There was no construction method, no standards, no nothing. The right is granted to use a space on the unappropriated public lands for highways. That was it. Pretty cool. Well, this is the Second Amendment. It's the same thing. There's no mode. There's no restriction. The mining grant for the highways is that you use it for the highway. There's no infringement upon that. There's no infringement the government can do. That sits in equity for remedy if they do come and interfere and infringe. The miner has the right to go get the minerals on those roads that he typically will. Well, the miner made the roads. He didn't ask nobody for money to build those roads. And then he has the obligation, if he wants to continue to do it, to make the payments to keep moving his mineral out. No one appreciates any of this stuff. The rights in Americans, the producer in this country, are paramount. And yet we forget about that. And you're all a producer if you just situate yourself just a little better than what you think you are. So we have this unconditioned right to keep and bear, and we have the antecedent position that can't be infringed as well. You just have to go research where all that is and bring it forward and make a documented approach in this Federal Register process, which you have a link, and it has all kinds of information on where they think they took this thing, and you're going to come back, if you so choose, not be a cricket, don't be the April Fool, or the May Fool, or the Mayflower, and you start doing what we need to do, and you can start to put an assertion against the imposition. And this is kind of an interesting one because, like I said, I don't care about the bump stock part. You can fire a semi-automatic pretty quick if you understand your. It almost does the same darn thing here as a bump stock if you know how to hold it. Right? So those of you who know your weapons, you know that. So it's not even about the bump stock. It's about the encroachment is what you're on. But you're able to make a record that's substantial to the prohibition against the government encroachment. Instead of going, oh, this is for hunting, oh, and I need it for my self-defense. So that's the antecedent right, but you prepare it up front that the government had no right to encroach. Is a simple process here in the Federal Register to go after, make your comment, to give your standing, self-standing, get yourself into an equity case, to enjoin the rule if it ever comes in, and be the one that starts making the arguments, or get together with a bunch of you that can make these arguments. And when you're done, I mean, are you sitting in jail? No, you're not. There's no jeopardy here. And then you're actually starting to assert your vigilance against the encroachment in the way that I think it was supposed to be done, though I don't like that. I know you don't like it, but that's the way this place called the United States of America was set up. So we're slave to that part, because there's the reality is there's always going to be an invasion against what you thought you wanted to do in what you consider to be free within that constraint, the freedom. And so here it is today, folks. You can whine and talk about all this stuff. You can say you don't care about bump stocks. I'm saying it's an infringement. They're just trying to get a toehold, like all this other stuff. And it's a very simple, easy way to do some reading on some really focused information, and then engage the comment system the way it's supposed to do, just like they tell you, and then give yourself the standing. And if it doesn't go, they don't do it quite right, then you get to go make it a decision in a court and show that court has no right to make a decision counter to the prohibition. Wouldn't that be cool? I'm here as an equity action that you infringed upon my right by this rule, and then they can't answer, so that's a default to the answer. The court has no right to engage it, so no, I'm not going to get their permission. For those of you, I'm trying to anticipate, I get all this nonsense. Oh, you're going to get their permission. No, I'm not. I'm going to break it in a position that there's not an issue that the court has to answer correctly. If they don't answer correctly, it's a bunch of fluff. They didn't answer. That's a default. And so, it's a certain way to set this up. You can do it. You have to start this one because I made it a rule, you have to start it in the process, a due process. You want to talk about your common law is all you have now is due process. Here it is. So deny it, and you deny your due process assertion. I don't know what you're talking about no more about, the government does bad. You're allowing it. Maybe you're doing this because you got some brain problem. Maybe we're affected, as I keep saying, you're epigenetically affected. Maybe the stuff you have is putting plaque on you. Now you don't have plaque on your teeth, you got plaque on, same plaque sits on your brain. Have you ever think about that? So we got these impediments that keep us from listening to the wisdom behind the woodshed, to start to engage again what we should have never not engaged, to go after the very things that these people, these insane people, the caucustocracy doesn't want you to have, because they're caucustocracy. They don't want you to have anything that can get them out of where they are. And you just complain against that. It's a nonsense. It's completely nonsense on its face. So self-evident nonsense. It's another counter-insanity. But we can get maybe help a little bit of that as scientists remove Alzheimer brain plaques in mice. The new animal research shines light on the therapy designed to rid the brain of much of the sticky amyloid plaque associated with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Experts have long viewed the plaque buildup as a largely symptomless marker for the future Alzheimer's risk, and many believe the process is a root cause of the disease. But unlike prior anti-amyloid efforts, the new therapy narrowly targets a specific protein called APOE lodged within such plaque buildup. It's the glue that holds it together. Won't read any more. You can get the broadcaster link. You can go on the internet right now and go read it for yourself. I wanted to point out first the protein, and I want to point out the problem, the unintended consequences in all this pharmachem vaccine stuff and genetic manipulation creates unintended proteins. So here's a protein that's not unintended, it's a consequence. It's the glue that holds these plaques together, and they're finding a way to interfere with that. It's something I think if you are looking at Alzheimer's, looking for a clue how to stop it for yourself, for someone that you know, maybe this may be focusing you on a way to go ahead and work that out. Integrate with this, figure out what they're doing, and maybe you can find whether it's a chemical lead in order to help you, or simply go look for the herb that may be out there to help this problem. Now you're focusing on a protein. This is my main problem with gene splicing and stuff, is that it creates unintended proteins. Notwithstanding the proteins that are foreign to you and your DNA that come in that are that are injected in too. So that make all these unintended consequences, which no one really wants to speak to. All right, so here, but Alzheimer's is a big problem. They've been telling us it's coming. The population that I speak to and maybe a part of, although I'm kind of the lagging, dragging foot of this group, these are the problems that we're dealing with. And to my mind, we're also the last vestige of the power, the numbers that we could focus on, our power and our knowledge and our awareness, reoriented our brain and what we're told about. We can start throwing some of this nonsense off that we've acquired through the life as they started messing with us back in the 70s and all this, whatever they're doing, whatever's happened, whatever the RFID, RF stuff and all that is, whatever consequence, we can start focusing back on that. We are the last vestige of the power with the witness of how to fight what the principles that have been stolen from us over the last few decades. And we're being affected, and I think maybe on purpose at some point when you see some other things, but they're also finding out, these studies are more, and the science is coming to prove out more what may be the cause, and we then can turn around and see if there's a natural or chemical process. Remember, I mean, when you look at vaccines, if the only choice you have is to die, maybe the vaccine's not such a bad consequence, notwithstanding it may give you cancer in 30 years. Okay, so that's the trade-off type of thing you have to start looking at, but when you have to make that decision. If you're someone of you that know about this protein and understand how it's created, you can understand maybe the herbs that are out there to counter the dynamic of it, then you might be able to come up with the answer for the rest of us to help get people out of their Alzheimer's problems, because apparently Alzheimer's is the leading cause of death somehow. It's kind of fascinating. Next story, ibuprofen could eliminate Alzheimer's disease. Ibuprofen could eliminate at-risk patients discovered via saliva test may be able to avoid dementia if they take a dose of the painkiller from the middle age for the rest of their life. Now, I'm not going to promote this as the salvation. I understand that ibuprofen has some very serious side effects, like all this stuff does. But when you're looking at dementia and forgetting to take forgetting what your life was like, and limit and ending your capacity to be viable, maybe this ibuprofen is an answer for you. I wanted just to put it out there because one of our abilities, again, we start doing things in our mind. We don't know what we're doing. Our actions are constrained by however our brain is being interfered with. And we don't have a sense of that, I don't think. Oh yeah, we know something's not quite as good as good. Boy, I'm going through some of that. Well, I can't remember. It seems like I'm forgetting short-term stuff anymore. I know it's because I have so much on my mind on some very big projects, but I just start to sense, there's just something that's not quite as sharp as it used to be. Well, it might be because I need to start looking at this myself. I don't know. I'm not saying so. I'm not selling this. I'm not promoting this as the answer. I'm saying there's some investigation that shows that this painkiller may actually work to help Alzheimer's. I would say be very careful on the side effects, like all this stuff. Everything needs to be looked at. So they keep attacking us, and then they keep diminishing us, and it's up to us it's our responsibility to be able to address both sides. The other thing that's coming on, interested to see this story drop from one site, but it's still back up, and I just wanted to comment, again, talking to how to respond to the government and its administrative side, and that you can play a part. And just to say, well, it doesn't matter. Well, I think it does matter. I mean, remind you, Jefferson Mining District was partly created for doing something called coordination, and as an entity, as a government, congressionally recognized miners government, it's able to engage the government at levels that most normal just people can't because of the way the law is. But it also can make public comments as a coordinator, and we have, as a district, in lots of areas. And I can just tell you that everywhere that we've been the witness to regulations that were wrongfully promulgated or about to be, we have not seen those regulations. So for those of you that don't think that this works, I'm telling you that it absolutely can work. You just have to be in the game. Take a little bit of time, a thoughtful consideration, put together a nice, concise statement, give yourself standing, and if that's a nice, concise statement that they have to regard, I'm always amazed that they don't take the next step to promulgate the rule. So you don't even have to go to court. Now, is that going to happen all the time? Absolutely not. None of this is. You may have to go to court, but be ready where you're going to be. Look at the remedy going down the road. So it's happening. DARE, DARE, ends anti-weed campaign quietly removes pot from a gateway drug list. Pretty interesting. As those of you that are in cannabis and the DEA and all this other stuff and the FDA and this listing of it doesn't know what it's doing, it's now not a gateway drug. Here's another list to those of you that are wanting to get it back into your public comment over there, come up with a factual response. Here's another one that silently they drop the pot as being a gateway drug to worse things. Now you can say that's not part of the opioid crisis that the CIA and pharma have created. See? So it just starts to build for those of you that are in it. It's just like it started. You're pushing the snowball, not being ready to be hit by it. Cannabis has been shown to kill cancer cells, save lives, countless epileptic children, treated PTSD, heal bones, treat brain trauma, and there's a bunch of links here, folks. So those of you that are into it or want to get into this, like you would get into your bump stocks, and just to jump in and say, hey, you don't have a right to infringe on what I decide I'm going to use against you, you oppressive government. But here are a bunch of lists you can put in here. You lied when you said that it doesn't do things. There's a whole list. It's got links and a slew of other uses science is only beginning to understand. So we got this. It's coming on, and all of a sudden this DARE campaign, the War on Drugs group, decides to pull out that it is a gateway drug. Is a kind of a big deal in a way. Oh, it's still illegal on the federal level, but we're not going to now promote that it's a gateway drug to worse things. Well, if it's not a gateway drug, then maybe it doesn't do what gateway drugs do, and maybe it's not what they've said it is, and all that. Now you open the floodgates to those of you that are interested. These are monumental things for people if they would just start to get engaged. I mean, to my mind, if I knew about a group of people, this would be like big deal stuff. One little report can be exploded into a whole bunch of power in a statement. And see, then the other thing is you have the education problem. You have to understand and I may or may not do this so well. I don't know that I do. Either I'm so well understood and people don't want to do what I'm doing, so I don't get the listenership at all, or that I would, or did, and people want to go to other people that sound like their stuff is better. Or you're just not interested. I'm either an educator that educates you to the thing you just admit you're not going to be responsible to, or I'm not a good educator. And either way is fine. But the point is there's some information here that even if you can't understand me, you should be able to find out for yourself if you're truly interested. If you're truly responsible. And I don't mean made up responsible. I mean truly looking at the real problems in what's going on and address it. I still believe with the millions and millions of us. Listen, the same reason why they didn't invade us in World War II because there was a gun behind every blade of grass is the millions that are sitting there with a mind and creative power to address to turn that gun into a piece of paper for the time being, to address the war against us locally, the war on drugs that's lying to destroy people. And this article also shows the industries that have been perpetrated up and built up around this lie. And now it's not a gateway drug. Those of you that are involved just shouldn't be popping corks. You should be jumping in to find this story. Okay, it's not a gateway drug. It has a limitation use, but look at what the floodgate it just opened. Look at the silent acknowledgement on the government's side. Federal funds are paying to delist it as this gateway. Oh, my mind just kind of starts running about all the power this starts to bring you that you concisely put together into a small statement. You turn around once you get that understood, and when you fully understand, then you can educate other people, not arguments. You just say, well, this is what this is. There's no argument. You can either agree or disagree, but there's no argument. Okay, so I'm trying to tell you I'm not, it was like, again, the chat last night I was in, well, I don't like fighting in the courts, folks. I don't do this to go to court. I do this what I do is try to avoid the courts. But what if I have to go to court, I got a record that doesn't make a question. It's not an issue we bring to the court. It's the answer. And all you're doing is you're looking for the remedy. You're just looking for the ability to, essentially the injunction. Stop it. That's what an injunction is. To enjoin. To stop. Stop. Just stop the crime. That's all that is. So here's the information, folks. It's coming down that this oppression, the tools of oppression, can be vanquished against us. Not one of us can do it, but lots of us could. And that's all I come here to say every week. And all the old long in the tooth guys, that like myself coming on here, we have a thought, I'm sure. There's a thought we have. We have a wisdom. We have an experience. Maybe not so good, but we can learn from that in order to do better. And then we have the focus that I don't think lots of people have. So at one level, I'm truly encouraged, but on another, every day that goes by, one of us is not going to be here. How many of our friends have we now found that don't chat no more because they're not around? They just disappear, gone. They were here and gone. So there's no time that we can use to wait. No time like today. Notwithstanding the devil in the procrastination that wants to come up and wants you to do that. Yes, I like to do that, and I have to fight that all the time. But I give myself reasons to keep moving forward and focusing on taking this thing that they handed us and using it against them. And that just self-evident means you're in a prison anyway. So what are you going to do? You're just going to let them have your way with you? I guess you could. So these regulatory things come along. We have abilities to jump in. You have to understand the subject matter. You have to understand where the regulators are, notwithstanding the conflict of interest with the bottom line, all that I talk about. You have to understand all that, and you do if you listen to Behind the Woodshed, right? You do. You know all about that problem. So you just set it up. You just work that through. Again, because I believe we know that problem with Jefferson Mining District comments and things like that, we understand you have to look at how they're going to decide something, and you have to address how they're going to decide it. And you pretty well knock their knees out from under it, take their feet out from underneath it. Before it even gets started, they don't even try. And so, what all the government says is no good. Now we start seeing it pull back. We see an adjustment. To me, this is all just power. On the other hand, you see the government coming in with this conflict of interest, and they just start letting things come on us. Remember, all this stuff that comes on us has been okayed by a government for profit. And I tell you, under Title 50, that's their license to do so if they want to. You saw them do it right up with vaccines and the immunity, the vaccine court. That was a big clue I don't think people appreciate. But a real big problem came up, I think, for us, with the regulation that everyone should be involved in this one. And this is back to those proteins that we find out are so important that cause us harm, that I tell you in these new technologies are creating unintended proteins, unintended consequences in materials within what they make that I don't think is had a big enough voice and certainly not enough people talking about it. People seem to talk about the wrong things. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe that's a psyop as well, but there's ways to talk on point about this. And you just have to get inside and see how this works. But CRISPR plants won't be regulated. These CRISPR plants, we talked about this Cas9 stuff, where they think they can surgically interject certain things to change organisms. They're not going to be considered to be genetically modified. If you understand that, then you understand how sieve-like all this regulation stuff is. So you have to match that sieve with your own cover. You have to be able to be more watertight than that with your discussion. But in a big win for biotech industry, the United States Department of Agriculture says it won't regulate plants whose genome have been altered using gene editing technology. That should cause some great alarm. I won't read more. You can go read the story when you get the list to the link in the blogcaster if you want to. But John Rappaport comes right back up and responds to this, and I think it's important to look at this because, again, for those of you that are interested to make comments or to get engaged or to force a comment, remember like that group did with the fluoride. They went after the toxic law, the toxic provision law, and they were able to open up the matter when the agency didn't look at it. So look for those things in the codes as well. But John Rappaport comes out to talk. Firefight breaks out over gene editing dangers. And in his story, again, he comes up with a lot of stuff for you about how the problem is the mutations. And he shows you all the reports if you're interested. This is not a small problem. This is a big. This is my main first question was these proteins that the cell, not under CRISPR technology, but there's no difference here. It ends up doing the same thing with the original gene modification. That the cell is a natural thing. You may not think it's alive. It's a natural life. It has a defense mechanism, and that's what it does when you invade it with a needle and put some stuff in it. It creates all these other things that are out there. It defends itself by re-zipping its own, epigenetically. It starts to defend itself. Re-engineering its own DNA. Just fascinating. Just amazing. And we're messing with that. And so I want to show that again for those of you who want to be interested, not disinterested. He brings up a lot of things that you can point out. I want to point out the main thing is that this CRISPR being handed carte blanche acceptance comes with the same problems and worse, because it also shows not that there's unintended combinations of genes that go on. There's this process where it subtracts or adds in ways they don't know. And I don't know, we don't have time. I mean, we don't take time necessarily to appreciate that. These simply could be adjusting how we think. And then we don't know what we're thinking or how we're thinking. We're changed. We don't know. That's if you don't believe a plant's sentient, then it wouldn't extend, would it? So, but for us, it changes us. Well, what about a plant's processes? And then what if they are sentient? What if it is the big Om, the big one? Well, what are we doing unintendedly that we aren't looking and actually applying how the principle for I can't think of the word. It's where you don't hurt anything. I don't know why that doesn't. That's like a New Age statement. I don't like even talking to it. But anyway, it's a principle that you don't. You look very carefully before you're going to really look at hurting something. The precautionary principle is what the Agenda 21 says. But that's attached with a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, so why aren't we doing that with our food stuffs, our plant stuffs? Now maybe gene therapies may not be. We don't care when we're dealing with things that the plant won't necessarily in process, won't pass through. But we're not talking about. We're talking about things that we will be consuming, or our animals are be consuming. And we find out, like the spongiform problem with the mad cow disease, it moves from beast to beast. It'll move from what chicken pox came to people. Come on. So we see these translations going through when we have all the evidence before they allowed the CRISPR gene editing. There's already been record that there's mutations and problems with combinations, additive differences, and all this other stuff. Anyway, so enough there. If you're interested, you are. If not, I don't know. This is sitting there for us to take on for those of you that are interested. And I think John's a good source. To start with, at least get you on the path real quick, like I would try to do in that subject matter area, at least to show you some of the documents and say, hey, you just can't look at these documents and not say, what the heck are they doing? What the heck are you doing is a good question. Only thing you bring up your objection, what the heck are you doing, becomes a proof with all this documentation in a comment. And you would then have standing, when they didn't fully weigh the consideration of that, you have standing to enjoin it until they do. Right? This is not that hard. I've been trying to explain, for all I talk, this stuff is not that hard. What's hard is to get engaged and taking responsibility to go do it. So the science is out there, so-called. They do all this stuff. They don't check out. There's no precautionary principle. They get you. They do technologies that change you without your consent, if you will, but it is with your consent because you keep doing what Silent Weapons Quiet Wars says. You're going to plug yourself into all those nice toys they hand us. And I'm not immune. If it wasn't for a technology, and I would not be talking to you today, so we're all part of that part too. But scientists say RFID chips will not be optional. They will change the very essence of what it is to be human. Okay, you're not a man no more. The future does not look at men or women. You're human, you're an animal. And the RFID chip, we talk about it being the hand, the numbers, being able to be read at a distance, your identity in the palm of your hand. We have Palm Friday or something at some point here, didn't we? Palm Sunday, what Palm Day? The face palm, what? RFID. What is it doing, folks? It's responding to frequencies. It means you're going to be in an environment fully frequentized. And all these frequencies are adjusting you as well. And then we talk about binary weapons, biological binary weapons as well. But they're saying this is not going to be avoidable. I think this is a notice to you that you're going to have to work to the future so that it's avoidable for your progeny. To this scientist authority, he's going to be authority if you remain crickets. The technology advances, things are becoming more and more intense and unique in every aspect of the word. Microchips for humans are things we have heard quite a lot about in the past few years, and with good reason. While the thought of being implanted with a microchip sounds painful, it apparently isn't. Like that's going to help us. Basically, it involves using a hypodermic needle to inject an RFID chip, microchip about the size of a grain of rice, and into a person's hand or wrist. These chips can then be used to lock and unlock home, cars, and other things of the sort. It is something that everyone is either excited about or completely against. There isn't much in between. Well, they only point about using it for your advantage. They don't talk about it as being an ID. They don't talk about it in the context of big data, in registration, control. If you don't have a phone, you can't use a Mines Reward account. Because we need to use that phone to keep people from making lots and lots of accounts to take advantage of the reward system. So those of you who don't have a phone, you're a second-class citizen. This is how this works. It's that simple. They want you on your phone. Now, I'm not alleging that Minds.com people are in the deep state. I can't tell you they're not. Who was it that came up with that kind of a thing where you're going to have to step into the very thing that the people at Minds.com would probably say they didn't want to step into, that they're going to be required to continue if they're going to flourish on that system, is what you're seeing everywhere. Do you think that I told you that the phone is just going to be the accessory? It's going to turn down to this thing, this credit card in your back of your pocket. They're going to have all the same technology as technology gets smaller. They get us focused on this RFID microchip again. It comes up again, folks, like we haven't heard about it before. They're pushing it again. It won't come by the RFID. It's already in your phone. And those frequencies are hurting you. And the whole point about it is not what you can do, it's what they're doing with what you think they've given you to do. And we crickets on all of this, and it's going to harm you. You're going to be some kind of a mutated cricket. I don't even know what you're going to turn into. And what do they do with this RFID data collection, storing all these things that they're doing? But you're finding it out, now it's just coming out. They're sticking it in your face. Facebook data has a zip file and has my entire call history with my partner's mom. Deep data, silent webs, quiet wars. I've mentioned this. Well, it came out again. Another story now, more clear. Facebook scraped call text messages from the Android phones. If you're not, understanding what they're doing when you put these apps into play, you do that. When you take on all of this gifting, these free programs by these big data companies, all just sucking information to do things that I've told you before. It doesn't matter that you're not doing anything wrong. Somebody could fabricate that you're doing something wrong. You tick somebody off in the wrong way, and you just might find yourself in a lot of trouble. What do you think's going on behind the scenes in the government? Do you think any of those people don't have something on them that they're going to toe the line? See, it's not what you see, it's what you don't see that's the problem. You're finding out that the SCL group utilizes this information, was underneath this other company that was data mining for the election, does it for psychosocial research. Psychosocial research. They're figuring out your brain, how you respond. They figured out that you can be dupable and how you get that your senses don't mean much to you if you don't understand the limitations. What I was talking about earlier at the broadcast. If you're going to get into this stuff, truly understand the battlefield. Truly understand your vulnerabilities and start to look to fortify up where they might be vulnerable if you are. And this digital realm is completely vulnerable. And so go ahead and put all your eggs in that basket. But I'm going to tell you up front already, it's not a good future. And that's where they want to go. They don't want you to have a good future. They are figuring you out. Here's the proof. Now, a couple of weeks ago now, I can't get to all the news I have. I'm really getting frustrated about that. It's coming so quickly, I can't tie all this together sufficiently. But this is, again, one of the rings of the Agenda 21 is a social. It's behavioral. It's figuring you out. This is one of the companies going behind Facebook. Okay? So they're telling you this is what they're doing to it. If we didn't even need to know more, it's all coming out more and more what's going on. How much information? I don't know if it meant anything, but I mean, and it's not like I don't have a digital footprint, but I am just so glad I never bought into Google. I mean, to participate in hardly anything they do. Yes, I got YouTube. YouTube. But even that, I got it blocked down. I can barely even see a video sometimes. But I didn't get into Google Plus, none of that stuff. Why? Because they're collecting all that data and it lasts forever and they're using it behind the scenes. And you don't even know how. And that's the other thing. You don't even know how. What they're doing is they're reconstructing your future. You don't see that. You won't even know how it's affecting you, this stuff. The timely video about dark patterns, quote, dark patterns, the tricks websites use to manipulate you. And this is really just an example of how the government, or the company, government, they're all government, how the companies get you involved and don't allow you to negate, to stop, to get undone, to delete what you were going to do. How they get you to click on things because of your perception. You get used to the little monkey and you get used to, like they'll show you a video, how you get used to clicking on a color. And then when you go to a different level or you ask for a different thing, the color pattern changes. And now the color that you were clicking, that you got it only takes a few times to do it, just a couple times. You click the same color 3 or 4 times. When you get to the new level, the color of the button that you're going to click now asks you to go buy something. And you just absent-mindedly click it without looking. And they make your selection so that the one you're supposed to select is so small, you have to really look closely at your screen before you can find what you need to do. They bury stuff. They'll bury everything that you want to do that is counter to their interest is gone. It's buried. They'll show you all about how this is called dark patterns. It's not unknown. The point is that people out there that are exploiting you, they know your physiognomy, you know how you're going to respond, they know your psychology, psychosocial, they know how you're going to respond, how you're not going to respond. They can predict it. They can say they can predict it. It's probably the scariest bit of it. So are you ready? Here is all the data Facebook and Google have on you. There's an article. They can show you all the stuff you've ever done. Ever. And by these dark patterns, they have third parties that have gone in. You've clicked and given them permission to scour everything else you did, all your emails, whatever. Oh, well, I don't care. I think you need to rethink about you don't care. Do you have no responsibility to yourself? You have actually no scruple in you that says that that's not cool? That you would let someone abuse you like that and that's okay? I would really have a problem with that myself. About you. Are you really abused that bad that you'll continue the abuse? And this is what they've done for us, and this is what they've done to us. We'd rather excuse it because it's easier not to mess with it. And part of my observation was, if I could get, and this is what the part of the Jefferson Mining District, if I can get miners to understand there's a formal process and get them used to that, then it won't be so foreign when we really have to get into the battle. We're at least geared up a bit. We practiced a little bit. We know how to communicate better. We don't go and do the long-winded nonsense discussion. We don't interject what we think we know over and on top of a system that won't listen to it. We learn to run and we learn how to do the battle the way the battle needs to be fought. So now it's coming out, folks. If you ever thought that this was a question or you thought you knew, great. Well, here's the proof. These companies are just pulling this information down, and my problem with it is that they use it against you. They track you down. They make stuff up. They get in your face. Listen, how frustrating is it to have to go 5 places in order to try and do one thing? Should tell you something. And you're willing to go do that. Or you won't do it at all. And what does that do? If it's counter to their interest and you don't finish it, then they win. They win that too. And we're so unavailable to what we can be trained to do. As I said, that little rat experiment, the human got the tail of the rat to move, and I said, no, that was the rat telling the human, only move my tail, I don't want to be embarrassed in this experiment. Inducing task-relevant responses to speech in the sleeping brain. Here's the highlights. Subjects classify as spoken words continue performing the task after falling asleep. If you don't think you're programmable. The movement-related brain activity in the absence of overt behavior is demonstrated. The sleeping brain can process spoken words in a task-dependent manner. Response preparation is slower in sleep than in wakefulness. So when they get you into your REM state while you're looking at your TV screen or that little concentrated eval, they can make suggestions and you'll perform them. I want you to think about that if you hadn't thought about it that way. So this is what they're coming down, psychosocial. They're figuring out how to get you to do things, and you're not even aware of it. It's underneath your perception. These things, can't tell you how, I've been talking about it for years, and they're just telling that's exactly what they're doing to you. And I don't hear much of any resistance to much of any of it. I want you to know about it. Part of the answer to this whole thing on all these levels is your knowledge, and knowledge that it's happening that can counter it. It's not just that you know about it. You have to be able to perceive it's working against you at the time. And this is one of the clues. This is how I tell you the language can be the predictor on some of this. I'm not talking about the technological dark patterns. Those are you can kind of find those too. But I'm talking about when people start using certain phraseology, terminology, you can anticipate where that's going. You start to understand that technique, and that gives you the power to stop it. Doesn't mean you can at the moment, but you at least identify it. Otherwise, it's transparent to you. When I talk about that transparency, that's what this is all about. They're figuring you out, figure out how you respond to stuff. They know your brain better than you do. You didn't even know your brain did that, and they got you doing it. So much so that this next story was kind of terrifying in a way, and I'm thinking about little ones. And maybe even on our own, we're looking at movies and things, and as a little one, got shocked in her, the movie scene that never left our mind for 70 years after, 60, 50 years, because it just shocked our little conscience to no end. We became avert to that. Here's another thing I was wanting to point out, how virtual reality safety training can trick the mind. Think about that, how virtual reality safety training can trick your mind with all of this virtual reality coming on the scene. And remember, the big mucky mucks in these data companies who are bailing out of them, who are support group, are saying, no, it's like crossing the red lines now, what they're doing. We knew it could do this, and we were avoiding it, but I'm bailing, so they're doing it. They're doing it, not because I'm bailing, but they're doing it, and I can't stand that we're doing it. In fact, my kids don't have a palm. They don't have a slate. They don't have none of that stuff. My kids. Because this stuff is so dangerous. Well, virtual reality safety training can trick the mind. It makes it sound like it's a good thing. But, well, this safety training is really you're seeing a virtual reality. They wrap your whole awareness. It's your eyes, your thought, your response, your balance, your hearing. That's all they really need is your sight and your hearing. And they immerse you in this environment. And they've found that they can show you things that you will be averse to in the future. I want you to think about that in your TVs and your little ones and all these immersive type things that are coming on as well, making it even more immersive, that they can feed you information that it will make you averse to some condition. How about making you averse to respond to stop authority? What if they are applying this, and they do apply it, and you watch it on your TV, but now they do it even more with virtual reality as a training, as a school now. It's a function of your school. They shock your mother, your mothers, send your kids to the school, and part of the game is a virtual reality game where in that game they're shocking your little ones to be averse to certain things that the behavioral control social engineers want them to not contend with, be contending with in the future. Is this article here? They talk about it Safety training. Well, what if the safety training is the government training you out of being resistive? Because it's safety training for them. Remember, I don't go too far from the idea that this is a military occupation, and they secure themselves. How virtual reality safety training can trick the mind, and you wonder why they're going to virtual reality and immersion technologies. Is this getting too creepy for you? Why I say these things are just concentrated evil. The good hats didn't get their hat on in time, didn't get on their horse, and then protect the rest of it. And I don't know that they can now. And so if you're not aware this can happen, you won't realize if they can do this in virtual reality, they've been doing it to you in your TV. Do you kind of get that already? For decades this has been going on. Just like they told us. Just like they told us. And so they got hacking your systems, you put the programs in, they've been giving you virtual reality training, they've been giving you aversion therapy, they're socially controlling you, they're behaviorally controlling you, you don't even know it. You're getting these amyloid plaques all over your mind, as they program you with it probably as well, and if not, then it acts like an amyloid plaque. And they're working you into a dementia, and you're going to sit there drooling on yourself and not conflict with authority. And we talked about bump stocks. That's the start of it. They just watch the amyloid plaque starting to come on the body politic. The parasite. The NASA worked to track down, the NSA, I would say NASA, the NSA worked to track down Bitcoin users, Snowden documents reveal. So they get you immersed in these games, and they get you into these programming situations, and they've programmed them. It's not something new, but now it's coming out some more. My problem was, on this story, it came from The Intercept. This was the Snowden documents. So I was telling you, be careful of the Bitcoin. It's not the end-all, be-all. It was the thing they start to get everybody immersed in and do the behavioral controls on. And they made it exciting, and you start pulling into it. Okay? Interesting, great technology, but I think it still needs to be privatized. It needs to be privatized and kept private. And ways to keep people out have to be made and still allow access. It's a pretty difficult conundrum. Like I said, the best thing that came to mind this morning was sandboxing each account, a transaction within a blockchain. So it's on a ledger, but it's not accessible by everybody, only the people that are party to it. Maybe that's part of Ethereum too. But also the game is the Bitcoin's taking a big dive, Ethereum's taking a big dive. This is the game they get you into. But the NSA has tracked down Bitcoin users. You saw it was anonymous. Well, no, proving it's not. But my problem with this whole thing about the Intercept is they knew this. The Intercept got this on the Snowden documents in, I think, 2013, they say. And my question about all this thing is, turns out that they can do that? And my question is, did the Intercept publicize this from the Snowden docs prior? No, they didn't. They held on. The Intercept held on to this. This is kind of like the Tor browser. Oh, we know there's a problem in there, but we're not going to let it on to the public until the NSA has a chance to get it exploited a bit. So now we know also that the NSA is involved, and this has to do with national security. So again, we're bringing up the idea that you're all an enemy combatant, you're deemed to be an enemy combatant. This is everything you do is a national security interest, and they're going to secure themselves. And to the point that they're going to allow you to program your computers and provide virtual reality to shock you into being adverse to confront the very crimes and oppression that's being put on you. Really fascinating psychological dynamic going on, and we're doing it to ourselves. Did the Intercept hold this back since 2013? Well, they had to, folks. So who are they working for? Now, I didn't get a response on that tweet. I'd certainly like an answer, one way or the other. What are they holding back all this documentation for? And it's this critical that those of you in Bitcoin are being tracked. You think that's the only one? I doubt it. And I told you, this blockchain technology is controlled by whoever creates it and you buy into it. That's the author. You will be conditioned by his rule. Or her rule. For those female programmers out there that will feel insulted. I don't mean to do that. In fact, some of the women coders are probably, I've seen them pretty much better than some of the guys I know. So where are you to help protect all this and call this stuff out? I don't know. This is what our problem is. We don't know the battlefield either. We always have to hold out that we don't know the battlefield. It's been made for you. You think The Matrix is not a movie? That's the telling of the tale. You walk yourself into an environment that was set up for you to go. That's the small silent weapons for quiet wars, by definition, and a publication that's willing to withhold that information until some later date. And I want to know why. I want to know why did they do it that way? And it's a rhetorical question. I kind of know why, right? You kind of know why. Why wouldn't they put it for unless they're working with them? And if they're not, why aren't they talking about that either? See, it's just a shameful condition all the way around. You see the NSA's involved, the United States government has their fingers everywhere. You talk about the blockchain not being, being somewhat protective a bit or anonymous and this and that. We've been left and right. And I've told you that they're going to lock down all this stuff. It's the government's system that you're working on the interwebs. This is the biggest honeypot I've ever seen in my life. This is the biggest limited hangout in all of mankind is this interwebs, the internet. And you think that you can be anonymous for whatever you think you can do. You think the NSA's got its fingers in it and it can't be controlled. If you don't have controls of the switches, you got no control. So wherever all this is going, you're going to be subject to whoever has the power to stop the main switches or to have access to them. So not only if you don't think this is not a global problem, that all the governments are looking at this and utilizing it for what it is, the FSBs to give internet messengers 10 days to hand over their encryption keys. Russia now shows that they're willing to come in and stomp on any encryption issues. Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, has ordered data exchange services such as internet messengers to give up the encryption keys for their clients' correspondence within 10 days of receiving an official request. Well, folks, we just heard that they keep those things forever. If you want a zip file of what Facebook has, well, you can go ahead. I know Twitter, you can go, I guess, get your whole database downloaded of what you've done all your whole time. It just sits there. If that happens to be an encrypted condition, maybe even each HTTPS encryption, they can break it by the order of a government. So we can talk about the fact that it's encrypted, but at the point that there's a way to break the encryption or get into the encryption part of those databases, the companies can be ordered by the government to do so, and they'll turn it over. I mean, this is not even hard to figure out. So do you think that the FSB is the only one, Russia's the only one doing it? No, the new backdoor around the Fourth Amendment, the Cloud Act, CLOUD Act. There's a new proposed backdoor to our data which would bypass our Fourth Amendment protections to communication privacy. Well, most of that really isn't private because it's a public device, isn't it? So be careful on what people tell themselves about these stories. You really have to get into the subject matter certainly a whole lot more than I can't even begin behind the woodshed or even for myself. I mean, this is almost beyond what I can keep up with, so it's just a matter of, at this point, just limiting my exposure. It's partly why I don't have a phone to get the Minds account hash, but that would be, buying into all that too. So I'm not going to be, my future is kind of limited in this digital world. And yours, in a way, should be too. But I know there's an alternative. I can almost see an alternative. People are going to have to come together to figure that out. Because what they're doing is something called the Cloud Act. They're going to ask for the back door. If they don't already have it, is the other joke here. But it's now going to be in the law that they're going to go through what? The cloud. It's exactly what that cloud, so-called, was set up for. For I have a man in the cloud, too. But it is built on a dangerous bill called the Cloud Act, which would allow the police at home and abroad, there's no borders, folks, to seize cross-border data without following the privacy rules where the data is stored. What's a border? I don't know. There's a jurisdiction in every county in the United States of America. You tell me. The back door is an insidious method for accessing our emails, our chat logs, our online videos and photos, and our private moments shared online between one another. This backdoor would deny us meaningful judicial review and the privacy protections embedded in our Constitution. Okay, well that means it must not be working. Okay, so new reality. Feds pushing a new plan. If that wasn't good or bad enough, Feds pushing a new plan. The encrypted mobile device unlocks for them, but not you. They want their back door, and now the agencies are looking at it. The companies are saying weakening security makes no sense, but they're not into sense. They're into security for the system. So be careful on anybody who's stepping up and using a false front for an argument. The Department of Justice is pushing for a new industry proposal that would grant law enforcement access to encrypted digital devices with a warrant. And we've seen how that works out. Just want to let you know, this is the battlefield. They're turning it up, folks. This is all coming down. There's not a voice to counter it. And when there is a voice, it's not listened to. Why? Because this was the honeypot of all time. This was the Limited-hangout, the Internet. And until some of these easier ways to go through the so-called dark web and on closed systems that work in that system, I think we're going to have a little bit of trouble. And I'm certainly not the one that's going to solve that. I don't have a clue on how that. I just have a vague idea on how this works. I've seen things that go out there, but it's beyond us at this point. And so I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying if you engage, understand. Know what you're dealing with. As I've told you, one of the things, okay, so I use a Tor browser. What does that mean? Well, it means I intend it to be private, which now requires they do have to show a warrant, which may be spacious in a way, but they do have to show that. And that gives me another angle. I'm not a guy that does anything, but just in case they make stuff up, folks, and I'll show you that if I get there, that they make stuff up. I mean, this is on and on. They can make stuff up. I told you it was coming, and here it is. But I have the ability to say then, no, I made that I intended that private. You have to show the warrant, and how did you understand to get the warrant on that account if it was encrypted? That it would contain the information you're after. And so you have another word in your mouth. You have a fallback position, even in face of an overwhelming odds. Okay? How many times have I heard firefights go on and there's only a few people being attacked by massive numbers of people and they still aren't overtaken? I don't know what to tell you about, again, this endless optimism I seem to have in us to be able to figure our own problems out and stop listening if we can get past the amyloid plaque problem in our brain that our virtual reality that we call the Internet is putting upon us. We get beyond that, I think we have a chance, folks. Maybe I haven't given up. I don't know. I got no capacity to fix it, but I haven't given up for us. So they want their back door. If the Cloud Act isn't enough, if FSB saying that we're just going to order them to open it anyway isn't enough. And then this little twist came off with your blockchain. I hadn't even thought about this. It's kind of funny what it takes to kind of straighten you up what cruelty is really in the world. For those of you that are in the blockchain, have you thought about your liability to, and then because it is a centralized chain, the people are stashing irrevocable child porn links, docs, copyright infringement, and leaked state secrets in the blockchain that you would have possession of and could be held accountable for. Did you know that, folks? That came as a shocker, actually. What do people? I didn't even know people did that stuff. See, I think it's all legitimate, but it's not. It can be used for some terrible things. And guess what? The NSA can already inject this stuff. So if they want you, you don't have to be doing anything wrong. They'll find you doing wrong. This is how this works. This is not to be trifled with some non-responsive answer. No, you may not be someone they're after, but what happens when you are someone? You decide to move forward in a county, there's a wrong going on, and it's a little more integrated in that county, and they have the people that come after you. Maybe one day your blockchain has this put on it. I was really kind of shocked about this. It kind of come at me from left field. People actually would do this, and then I know the government would. Someone in the government even, just some little critter, some creep inside is, I'm going to go after them, and has the tools to do it, which the NSA put out for everybody, right? So they could hide their tracks. You see how that works. So if all that vulnerability isn't enough, we have now this story. Under Armour admits 150 million users affected by data security breach. A product called Under Armour. No, it's Under Civ or something. It's not Armour. They've got to change their name on this one. You rely on these things, these softwares, these digital coded things, and they can be, again, giving up your information. And this is essentially to the hackers because the NSA's got it, the government's got it, the companies have got it, Microsoft's got it, Apple's got it. They all got it, folks. and you say, oh, well, I don't do anything wrong. I'm telling you, you just heard a report that said someone can inject a blockchain into your computer and give you that stuff. And guess what? You don't have access to it. They do. Talk about a surprise. Okay? I mean, I don't want to, maybe I do have a vast imagination on this, but I don't think so, folks. They're telling us. I haven't been really wrong in how they put this together this way. And all this stuff this week came on the digital demise, if you will, if you're not paying attention. If you're not paying, even if you are, I guess is my thing. I'm looking at it, but what am I going to really do to stop this nonsense? Well, I don't get Under Armour. I used to make armor, folks. I mean, medieval safety equipment. Okay, so I know about Over Armor. And I knew the consequences of having a bad piece of armor, so we try not to do that at all. I don't think we ever had a failure. I don't think we had a data breach in the armor I made. Okay, so this is also a different mentality, and there's really not a mentality to protect you. It's protecting the system. It's all broken. And the problem is we still need it. Alright? I'm just saying it's there. Be aware, folks. I'm not saying don't use the technology. Understand what it's doing and start to work with people in order to fix those vulnerabilities. I think it might be okay. You just don't rely on these other people. And so we had blockchain, the technology, it's just a big ledger of where you were, when you did it, all this stuff they tie together. They can even throw porn or whatever they want to do on your blockchain. You get involved. And you're now doing something wrong you didn't even know was going on. And so it's vulnerable, and the governments know this. And this is another interesting story that pops up. Even the world's most cashless nation doesn't want to go fully cashless. So there's some realities about this digital world. And what's interesting here, the interesting observation that I read it behind the woodshed, I pointed it out, but it pointed out the problem with this digital world, this virtual reality, this tool of social behavioral controls. Even if the world's most cashless nation doesn't want to go cashless because there is no way to stop any kind of a catastrophe where cash is still going to be required. And the biggest lesson was where? Puerto Rico. The Fed had to send plane loads of cash so people could actually continue doing their daily routine. I would ask you, that tells you a thing. That's a reality thing. Don't put your eggs all in one basket, and don't rely unaccountably on the digital realm. And I see something in here in one of the chats. Don't use blockchain a big chicken. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying be aware of the vulnerability. Right now, it's in the Wild West. There's not going to be an issue, and you can move around, and all you guys are playing with it. But the problem is, it's actually from a very small few of you that are doing that, it seems, and without conscience of the overriding use that the government's putting on this, that when the rest of the people show up, they're going to be oblivious to it. And I'm wanting to say, if you're going to get involved with this, be really sure you understand what's happening. The writing's on the wall on all of this. It can be taken from you. To me, watching the Fed drop cash, because there was no electricity, folks, in Puerto Rico, was also the reminder, instead of using the cash, which is fiat, and a valueless paper until it became valuable. See, they didn't have anything else. All of a sudden that became really valuable, didn't it? Is maybe you start running back into the silver and gold coin. I mean, just have the substance there. Don't put your eggs in one basket. Don't rely on any of this stuff. Actually, start slowing down on how much you are bringing this on you. If let's say for Minds.com, I can't get, if I'm not going to be able to interact with that, I'm not going to be on that forum. I'll be gone. So it's just going to be what's going to be the future. Now, I'm not saying I am. I'm saying if that's the way it works, I don't have time for messing around with that. Or any of these other ones, as soon as they become too much trouble. And that's pretending a future where you're going to have to start knowing more specificity. It's kind of leading into the privatization thing. You're just going to have to know where all this stuff is on the internet if you want to see it anymore. Because the public side of it's going to be all controllable or injectable. Again, injecting you, just like they're doing with the vaccines, like they do with the CRISPR, like they do with the surgically implanting things and changing your behavior. And another thing in the real world fiction, the fiat, in unprecedented move, China plans to pay for oil imports with yuan instead of dollars. We now find the yuan, petro yuan, now stepping in, as we reported here behind Woodshed years ago. Now they're moving it in. Now, there's an interesting dynamic in economics, and I'm not an economic guy, just the basics of it I understand. This is not going to be like throwing the whole thing on its head because now China has this petro yuan. It starts a whole dynamic of problems for them as well, and they really have to watch out for this. But the thing is that the main government, the global banks aren't too concerned about it. And so this is where I tell you, this is all part of a plan, okay? This is all integrated. But you also see the threat, like with Russia and China and the United States, like they did when Libya wanted to make its own dollar. You see the war threats now focusing on Russia and China as they're attempting to move things more privatized. See, that's the problem. I keep telling you, you got to privatize all this stuff, and that's going to be your problem. But that's going to be what you're going to have to do. And if the only way you're going to be able to protect it, to continue to do it, is if you can protect it. And so you have to work the chess game out a little ways. So there's going to be a petro yuan in China. It's going to build their renminbi. They have a dynamic. What happens? It sounds to me in this, and I read this to you a long time ago. What starts to happen? It starts to put pressure on the United States a bit. What'll happen is it'll raise interest rates. It's just giving a place for the Fed to start raising interest rates because they got nowhere to go here, folks. But when they start raising interest rates, I want to put those of you that were alive then back into the 80s and understand what happened to that problem. It gets expensive, folks. And you can't do much because there's no loan money. It's going to get a lot more expensive and more difficult. So look to that potential. The way you stop that, again, was having, again, the silver and gold money as a hedge, if I can call that. And so start looking at the dynamic of the world so that you stay ahead of the game. Now, in some regard, I don't have anything, so I'm not really worried about it. But for those of you that are like at retirement and all this other thing, or have money here and there and whatever you got, look how the dynamic plays out. Don't get all weirded out that things are happening, but understand there seems to be a control that's okay with all this. Also understand that the government's not completely going to go cashless. They're only going to go cashless for you. Where they're going to keep this data, your financial life is going to be on the blockchain. Your property is going to be on the blockchain. And they're going to control that blockchain, just like we heard in Chicago and Texas. Folks, it's right there for us. I'm just trying to tie all these things together. They all came together again. I wanted to remind us all this, it just occurred to me, this is the biggest, again, the giant honeypot. We're just asked to jump in, and we are. I don't know why that is. It's, big limited hangout. The rug can be pulled. Your life is not so certain when before it was, when you dealt in really with people. You can be infiltrated. You can do all kinds of stuff. The government has access to all this digital realm. They have, the tools are there for them to use at advantage and not you. All this is indicative of things I've talked about that are not so nice to think about. But it's in front of our face the whole time. Appeals court has no problem with cops using E911 services, E911 services to perform warrantless real-time tracking. These little pieces of concentrated e-value you call phones, folks. The Fifth Circuit Court of Court says it's fine if the government uses mandated emergency services to perform real-time GPS tracking. It doesn't go so far as to affirm the constitutionality of the action, but it achieves the same ends by voting down the appellant's request for rehearing. I'll let you read it, but let me point out to you, E911 is the United Nations imposition for international emergency services. It's an enhancement. And every time I talk about it, I haven't used the word enhanced for a long time. Enhanced is not a good thing, like modernizing. None of that law is any good. It's for the system. It's for the governance. Okay? And now you see they can actually do it for real-time tracking. Well, how are they doing that? Well, they're doing it through your GPS, through your tracking, through your phones. Well, what about all those phones? Those smart phones. Not so intelligent, just smart. Part of the technocrats' vision for you. What's in those? What are they tracking? What are they getting? Well, I think I picked this up off of Twitter through Jules' account for UCY, all the sensors in your smartphone and how they work. And I think I sent back a Twitter saying, know thine enemy. Your smartphone is a remarkable feat of engineering. And folks, it is. That's fantastic. It's half a dozen or more gadgets packed into a single slab. And hopefully you haven't slabbed yours and it still somewhat works if you need it, although you know you're vulnerable. But much of its coolest features are accomplished with a wide range of sensors. But what are they and what can they actually do? So, here's a thing you want to find out what's in your little concentrated e-vial. There's the sensors that they're tracking you with. This is what they say under warrant, but you heard all the other places. They can already get in and they can track and do things that they want. And now you hear they can interject your files with other files, and you have no clue what's in those files. And you think that the government would be looking for ways to protect you against infiltration, but in the same week, Georgia passes anti-infosec legislation. Passes this now, folks. Despite the full-throated objections of the cybersecurity community, the Georgia legislature has passed a bill that would open independent researchers who identify vulnerabilities in computer systems to prosecution for up to a year in jail. So those so-called white hats who would be out there looking for the vulnerabilities before doing that check could be thrown in jail in Georgia. If you didn't understand what the problem is in this country and in the globe about this technocratic future that they're forcing down your throat, they don't want you to know about this stuff for sure. And the so-called full-throated opposition, so there's your public comment. And so here's my observation about this. So you went in and you told the legislature that they made it, and they made this law, and now what are you going to do about it, folks? Well, if you can frame the problem in a right you have, in a vulnerability, a corollary vulnerability that it creates, you can move to enjoin this, can't you? I don't know if anybody is, but that's what you could do. It's not over. Now, this is a more gray area. It's not so certain. It might create an issue, so then maybe the court would have to be involved. I don't know. But we could all sit back and realize that the encroachment's going on stealthily and just complain about it, just whine all the time. Or we can take note of what's really going on and form up in groups wherever we can and start to work organized against this the proper way. So, I mean, it was kind of almost a shocker. Why would you want to stop people from looking? That's like building a car and arresting the mechanics who find vulnerabilities in the operation. And this is the reality of this cockastocracy we live in anymore. As we find out, again, with even the Cloud Act, that's not even good enough. The FSB can open up and threaten all these people for their security encryption codes. You got the Cloud Act, you got the FBI asking for intrusion, you got the court saying we want your stuff, and then we forget the very first insult that companies can turn over the records and amounts of customer data to the United States, in this case, Amazon. Again, this is an older story. It's all been coming all together. Now I just pull it all together for you. So you go in and you do shopping and this and that, and they just track everything you do, and the government comes and asks, okay, Amazon hands it over. And you're saying, oh, but I don't do anything wrong. And I'm saying, but they're telling you they can find you out, track you back, get your address, and then inject your system with things if they don't like what you're doing. And by the way, you bought some chemicals that we don't like you to buy. Maybe you're doing meth. Well, you did do some research about bump stocks. Maybe we have the ATF come down on you. I don't know. You're just vulnerable. Microsoft to ban offensive language and monitor your private account. Now, if it wasn't bad enough to Google and this, that, Microsoft is right. And then you see Windows 10, what they did. Phone home. Come on. This is just right in our face. Microsoft is cracking down on what people say while using their services online. According to the new services agreement written by the company, the tech giant is planning to ban accounts that use offensive language, in quotes, and will go through your private data to investigate users. Microsoft is warning customers of Office, Xbox, Skype, and other products that the company is prohibiting offensive language and inappropriate content starting May 1st. May Day. How's that, folks? Why you wondered why I didn't like Skype and went off of that. And I'm willing to not talk with you all because of it. Same thing, I'm willing to drop mines if I have to. That's probably not going to be such a drop-dead thing. I just won't be able to participate in the rewards. But I have no use for it other than to promote the content once I start. So what's the purpose? You're just going to have to find me at RLM for as long as Grimner will have me. Thank you, Grimner, for that. Oh, before I forget, I understand that freedomsnetwork.com is going to have to pay a bill. I didn't know about all this till here just a day or so. Those of you using Freedom's Network, please contribute to the server cost. It's about $360. Should have did this at the leading into the broadcast. I forgot totally about it. But Freedom's Network, social network, has no censorship whatsoever. Grimner runs the backside of that as well with Bo Diddy. They're going to need the server costs for that. And if you all can pitch in about $1, for those of you that can, maybe $5 if you can, if you can a little bit better, and we get those servers up. Freedomsnetwork.com needs some donations. Otherwise, as Grimner says, he's doing it for you all. He never thought to do a social network, but it's there. But if you're not willing to pay for it, maybe it's okay to go away. And I'm getting to the point where that's about where I'm at. If you're not willing to cough up some stuff to support these networks, then I guess it's meant to go away. I mean, this is what extinction's about, right? If you're going to agree to support Skype, Xbox, Microsoft, Google, Facepalm, Faceplant, whatever, whoever, all these companies, and you're not going to do little guys like Freedom's Network, Real Liberty Media, UCY.TV. I don't know what to talk to you about, actually, folks. But here's the notice. Microsoft's going to be your First Amendment partner. And without getting too much into it, thank you for the email that requested about going after this problem in free speech. And what I suggested, really just as a focus, I think it's still addressable, even though they're private companies. And I'm not going to go back all through that. Past the broadcast, I've talked about how I would try to approach that. And so thank you for having the concern and wanting to jump in on that emailer. I appreciate that you're doing that. But this is what needs to be done, folks. These people are getting away with all this nonsense. And your stuff can be scrutinized. And you think that you're getting demonetized on YouTube and your stuff's being cut out. Well, now Microsoft's doing it just like we predicted Windows 10 would allow them to do. What's the big secret here, folks? Why anybody even thought about it? And if you did think about it, why are you continuing to use products for these oppressive companies? What do I use, folks? Well, I went to another company who developed an open forum processor. I use OpenOffice.org stuff. They got handed off from Cisco, I think it was, onto a more open company. I haven't heard that program is accessible by anybody. So until I'm given that notice, I use an alternative product, folks. This is down to your applications. They call them apps now. They're built in with this nonsense. And I've been looking for things, alternatives left and right. People apparently don't like, well, certainly with the phone stuff. People don't want to follow around. We're not really together in order to do that, to keep ourselves private and anonymous by the fact that we're unpredictable and can move en masse to special things that are understood by all of us at the drop of a hat. That's another way to fight the guerrilla tactic in the field of the interwebs, is not being too stuck to it. And so I'm just trying to show you there's other ways. So you're a guy who doesn't, nothing you do is no good, is bad. You're a woman that has no ill will for anybody. I told you a long time ago, and I'm every word I say is eventually going to be able to be put together any way someone wants to. I told you I was able to do not exactly this detail at all, but in making video, I could take someone's 15-minute speech and I could edit it down with certain little interesting little tricks, nothing special, just interesting little video tricks, cutaways, inserts, all kinds of stuff. I could actually modify the statement that a speaker could do, and I told you at the time I was attempting to take a 15-minute, I only had 2 minutes to show it, so I had to take a 15-minute speech, and I hope, it was my intention to make sure I represented what the speaker meant. But I took a 15-minute speech and turned it to a 2-minute speech, and you could watch that video and never know that that's what I'd done. Well, it gets even better. And so I told you a long time ago, my voice here is going to be, and you see the Google tools, which are great, the transcript tool. I can always go back and see what I ever said, however misspelled it might be. It's there. They take a recording of your voice. I told you at some point they're going to take those parts and they're going to make you say stuff that you didn't even know you said. JFK lost speech after assassination recreated by sound engineers now proves the point. Very fascinating. They took 180-something samples of speech, or 800,000. Let me go read this. According to the British newspaper, the Times, engineers managed to pull 116,777 soundbite units from 831 of JFK's speeches and radio addresses to bring the text to life of a speech he never said because he was assassinated, but he had printed. And they took it, and they took all these soundbite pieces, and they recreates his speech by his voice. And there are some spots that you can tell. But that's just a matter of time to fix, folks. They were able to take a speech he never verbalized, and they now recreated. I have the link for you. It's pretty neat. But what I told you about being able to get they take your voice off the internet. They take your voice from Facebook, wherever that little concentrated eval device is, where the microphone is, wherever you are in your house. They take your voice, and they now are telling us they can splice that together and say stuff that you never said. In this case, he intended to say it. He never got the chance, JFK being assassinated. For those of you that don't know, he got assassinated. He was the President of the United States and got assassinated. A sound sampling system construction's been made to have him sound like he's stating a speech he never made. It was called the JFK Unsilenced Project. Fascinating, cool stuff. But this is what they have the power to do. For those of you that says, I don't do anything wrong. I'm not here to do anything wrong. Folks, I've told you they can make it look like you've done something wrong. So my prediction of that, it's not such a prediction. You can see the writing on the wall. Years ago is now proven. All my voice for myself, all these years, what do you think they could come up with, folks? You don't think it's above adding things in to take your perception, change your perception, give yourself something to do? No, the YouTube will add information from Wikipedia to videos about conspiracies. They will input on your content what they want. This is all the point here, essentially. YouTube will add information from Wikipedia of all places. This is the monument of truth, isn't it? The truthiness, I guess. Wikipedia, from Wikipedia to videos about popular conspiracy theories to provide alternative viewpoints on controversial subjects. Its CEO said today, this is a few weeks ago, YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki said that these text boxes, which the company is calling information cues, the virtual reality impositions, adverse shock therapy, information cues, could begin appearing on conspiracy-related videos within the next couple of weeks. Well, don't need to say more. They will certainly import their information onto yours as a proof that they do that. I think my question on all that was, well, are they going to do that to every other piece of content? And if not, then aren't they acting at that as that propaganda tool that congressional act forbids, which is another aspect of how I said you can attack this when they start censoring you and they don't censor everyone. They become a domestic propaganda tool, and they infringe by interfering with your content. They're doing it to silence adverse alternative views, which is exactly what they're doing to put this on alternative viewpoints, is to diminish the content representation made by the provider, the producer, is one way to approach the infringement that a private company does when it's publicly offered. Now, in a way, you can see where if they were private, took membership of some kind of thing, some other thing, whatever it is, that they might be able to do this. But when they hold themselves out to the public, my view, and the court cases and things for other areas, subject matters, are they cannot discriminate. The very fact of saying alternative viewpoints will be placed over your representation, your speech, your presentation, is a diminishment. And they admit it's to an alternative viewpoint. Now, I'm not even talking about the problem here, where who is supposed to make the decision on what alternative and what conspiracy and what theory is and what all this nuance. This is what you have to cut through. You determine what that is. You don't leave it to them. But anyway, so they're telling you they're willing to throw this information on you that they deem whatever they deem is going to be. I'm saying if you remain crickets, then you deserve what you get. And we could be running around the internet finding all the new homes, and then there's 3 or 4 new ones. Folks, I don't know if I can keep up, to tell you the truth. I really don't know. I mean, physically, my mind just... It's not integrated that way anyway. It never was in MySpace. It wasn't on Facebook. I only got Twitter because someone said, well, why don't you just jump in Twitter? And thank you to Free and Slave for saying go to Minds, because it did preserve that there, and we have got lots of viewers. But, now we see that the truth may be a little bit more stark as to the reality. Not a judgment, just the reality is what it is. We're conditioned by the technocrats' future, that the future they want, and that we are not responding to stop it. Now, I guess that's the only thing I always have to say. I mean, are you going to step up and stop the crime against you? Or are you going to act as an accessory to it and continue? And again, I come to the end of my tabs. I got so much more to go. All this intrusion, where I wanted to talk a little bit more. I don't have the time about where the machine is now provided with a license by the regulators to harm you without liability. And you need to understand that's another integrated problem that we are not even talking about yet. It has to do, and I won't get to it, has to do with these autonomous cars. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to touch much about it, but you're going to understand that the way the rules apply is that if the machine was not programmed, it cannot be found in fault for what it doesn't do. And yet you can. And that is a prejudice. I don't even know where we begin to look at that. But that's what's coming up. And so all these gadgets, the Internet of Things, all these gadgets are going to have no fault. And part of it's because you keep consenting into it. And partly because they keep telling you, well, we're in there. Where's it? What's inside? Intel's inside. When the car runs you into a barrier, well, we don't know. Was it us? Was it the NSA? Was it some hacker? Was it just because we didn't like the colored dress you ordered or the cup of coffee you ordered the other day? We're going to get rid of your type. We didn't like the speech that you stated. We didn't like the video you put up. We're going to run your type into a wall. How many reporters and journalists have we heard about that? So it's not so bad. Anyway, the machines are not going to have much of a liability in the future, and that's not going to be right. We're going to have to stop that as well. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said will inspire you to move on forward and roll up your sleeves and do something. Grimner, thank you for what you do at reallibertymedia.com. Again, donations to freedomnetwork.com to get it going. If it's not done within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's going down, folks. If there's no payment for the service for a year, it's not happening. Jules at ucy.tv, thank you for what you do and keeping this broadcast in simulcast, broadcast, recast, and all those casts. And I'll be with you next week, tech diffs and nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony, Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.